My daughter snatched the medical bills from my hands and threw them across the kitchen table. With a voice full of frustration, she said, "Mom, you can't keep refusing treatment. We're trying to help you here." The papers scattered like fallen leaves, much like my sense of control had over the past few months. I stared at Victoria, barely recognizing the determined young woman who stood before me. At 28, she had Thomas's gentle eyes and my determined jawline, but something in her expression had hardened with worry. When had my caring daughter become this overwhelmed caregiver? "Mum, are you even listening? This is exactly why Thomas and I need to handle your medical decisions. The treatments are getting more complex." She sighed heavily, gathering the scattered bills with shaking hands. I didn't respond immediately. What could I say? For the past 6 months, since Thomas, my partner of 15 years, had convinced Victoria I needed more intensive medical supervision, they'd gradually taken over my healthcare decisions, limited my independence, and monitored my every symptom, all while I watched, feeling increasingly helpless and confused. "We're doing this because we love you," Victoria continued, her voice softening with exhaustion. "Thomas says your condition is progressing faster than expected. You need constant monitoring now." The words stung because I remembered when she used to ask for my opinion on everything, trusting my nursing background and experience. But Thomas had always been persuasive about medical matters. As someone who'd worked in healthcare administration, people trusted his judgment about treatment protocols, including our daughter. Including me, until I started noticing the inconsistencies. "I need to rest," I said quietly, my hands trembling slightly. "I think I'll lie down for a while." Victoria's expression softened with relief. "Good idea. Thomas will be home late tonight. Some crisis with the Kim family's insurance claims. I'll check on you before I leave for dinner with Marcus." Marcus, her fiancé, who worked in the same medical billing company as Thomas. I'd met him several times, and each time something about his easy agreement with Victoria's concerns about my condition made me uncomfortable. I retreated to my bedroom, the one space they still allowed me some privacy, though I suspected they'd been checking my medication compliance more frequently. I closed the door and sat at the edge of my bed, hands pressed against my temples. At 60, I wasn't young anymore, but I wasn't as sick as they claimed either. The rapid decline they insisted I was experiencing felt manufactured, a careful construction that had begun shortly after I'd questioned Thomas about unusual medical expenses showing up in our household budget. "Experimental treatments," he'd explained dismissively. "Nothing you need to worry about, Marie. I'm handling everything." But I had worried. I'd always managed our household finances while Thomas handled the bigger medical insurance matters. Those expenses, $3,000 here, $5,000 there, were for treatments I didn't remember receiving from doctors I'd never met. When I'd pressed for details, showing him the bills, his face had darkened momentarily before softening into concern. "Honey, we discussed this last week. Don't you remember? Dr. Martinez said these memory issues might happen with your condition." But we hadn't discussed it, and I'd never seen Dr. Martinez. That was the beginning. Small comments about my forgetfulness. Appointments I was certain I hadn't scheduled appearing on my calendar. Medications moved from where I'd placed them. Thomas's worried discussions with friends and family about my episodes. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late. He'd convinced our daughter, our friends, even my brother Grace, who lived across the country. My attempts to explain were dismissed as confusion or denial, further evidence of my declining condition. I reached under my mattress and pulled out the small notebook I'd been keeping dates, conversations, medical bills I'd managed to photograph before Thomas locked me out of our financial accounts. My evidence that no one would believe. The doorbell rang, startling me. I quickly returned the notebook to its hiding place and listened. "Mrs. Chen isn't accepting visitors today," I heard Victoria say firmly. "I understand, but I'm not here to see Marie. I'm delivering these insurance documents for Thomas." A woman's voice. "Unfamiliar, professional. I can take those." "I'm sorry, but Mr. Chen specifically asked that I wait and give them to him personally. Confidential patient information." I moved quietly to my bedroom door, opening it just a crack. From the top of the stairs, I could see a tall woman in a crisp business suit standing at our front door, a leather portfolio tucked under her arm. "Well, he won't be home for hours," Victoria said, irritation creeping into her voice. "You'll have to come back tomorrow." The woman glanced at her watch. "I see. Perhaps I could leave my card then. I can reschedule." As she reached into her pocket, her eyes flicked upward, meeting mine through the narrow opening of my door. There was no change in her expression, but something in her gaze, a momentary intensity, made me freeze. "Here you are," she said, handing Victoria a business card. "Please tell Thomas I'll be in touch." After Victoria closed the door, I retreated back to my bed, heart pounding. Something about that woman seemed oddly familiar, though I was certain we'd never met. 15 minutes later, I heard Victoria's footsteps approaching my door. "Mom, I'm heading out to meet Marcus. Thomas should be home around 9. There's soup in the fridge. If you get hungry, and don't forget to take your evening medications." Her voice was gentler now, almost the daughter I remembered. "Thank you, sweetheart," I managed, hating the weakness in my voice that she would interpret as another sign of my condition worsening. I listened as she descended the stairs, grabbed her keys, and left. The house fell silent, and for the first time in days, I was truly alone. I waited another 10 minutes before moving to my window, watching Victoria's car disappear down the street. Then I pulled out my emergency cell phone, purchased months ago during a rare, unsupervised trip to the pharmacy, paid for with cash I'd been secretly saving from household money. I had one chance to get this right. Tomorrow everything would change. My fingers shook as I typed out the text message I'd rehearsed countless times in my mind. "Ready, 10 a.m. tomorrow. Bring everything we discussed." I sent it to the only number programmed into the phone, then deleted the message. The next morning I woke before dawn. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing comfortable clothes and practical shoes. I packed a small bag with essentials and the notebook containing my evidence. At 7:30 I heard Thomas leave for his morning jog, a Saturday ritual he never missed. Victoria wouldn't arrive until around noon. She always slept late on weekends. At precisely 9:45, I walked out the front door of the house where I'd lived for 12 years, locking it behind me. I didn't look back. By the time Victoria came to check on me later that day, she would find the note I'd left on my perfectly made bed. When she saw what I had done, I knew panic would set in. Not for my safety, but for what was about to be exposed. I sat in the small cafe 2 towns over, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. The morning crowd had thinned, leaving just a few patrons scattered among the tables. At precisely 10 a.m., the bell above the door chimed. The woman from yesterday, the one who had delivered documents to my house, walked in, scanning the room until her eyes found mine. She moved with confidence, sliding into the seat across from me. "Marie," she said, "not a question, but a confirmation. I'm Sarah Thompson." Up close, I could see she was perhaps 10 years younger than me, her dark hair showing only a few strands of silver. Her eyes were sharp, observant. "You were at my house yesterday," I said, keeping my voice low. "How did you know who I am?" "Your brother Grace hired me." She placed a business card on the table. "Thompson Investigations." I nearly knocked over my coffee. "Grace, but he believes I'm—" "He did," Sarah corrected, "until he received this." She slid a sealed envelope across the table. Grace's handwriting marked it as returned mail. With trembling fingers, I opened it. Inside was a birthday card I'd sent Grace 3 months ago, along with a handwritten letter detailing my suspicions about Thomas, a letter I'd never actually mailed. "Thomas intercepted it," I whispered, the pieces falling into place. "He must have been going through my things." Sarah nodded. "Grace received that envelope 2 weeks ago, forwarded anonymously. He called me immediately. But who would?" "We'll get to that," Sarah said, checking her watch. "Right now we need to move. Thomas has already been to the house. He found your note." My stomach clenched. In my letter I'd written only that I needed time away to think, that I would be in touch when I was ready. I'd said nothing about my suspicions or plans. Still, Thomas would know I'd escaped his carefully constructed web of control. "What about Victoria?" I asked, thinking of my daughter. "He's called her. She's on her way to the house now." Sarah stood. "My car's out back. We have a lot to do today." I followed her to a nondescript sedan parked behind the cafe. As we drove, Sarah explained what she'd discovered in the 3 weeks since Grace had hired her. "Thomas has been systematically manipulating your medical care for nearly a year, not just falsifying your condition, but billing insurance companies for treatments you never received. He's incredibly careful, uses multiple providers, makes everything look like legitimate medical care." "The Kims," I said, remembering what Victoria had mentioned yesterday. "He said there was a crisis with their insurance claims." Sarah's gaze flicked to me in the rearview mirror. "The Kims discovered discrepancies in their medical billing. Thomas has been scrambling to cover his tracks." We arrived at a small motel on the outskirts of a neighboring town. Inside a modest room, I found my brother Grace waiting. "Marie," he rushed forward, enveloping me in a tight hug. "I'm so sorry I didn't believe you. I should have known better." Tears stung my eyes as I returned his embrace. Grace had always been my protector, my confidant. Thomas had managed to drive a wedge between us, but here he was when I needed him most. "There's someone else you need to meet," Sarah said, checking her phone. "She should be here soon." "Who?" I asked, wiping away tears. "The person who sent the envelope to your brother." 20 minutes later, a knock at the door announced her arrival. Sarah opened it and I gasped. "Mrs. Chen," said Rebecca Kim, whose family had been receiving care through Thomas's medical network. We'd met at community health fairs over the years, but had never been close. "Rebecca, you sent the letter?" She nodded, taking a seat at the small table. "I've been suspicious of Thomas for months. My husband trusts him implicitly, but I noticed irregularities in our medical bills. When I confronted Thomas, he always had explanations that sounded reasonable." "So, you started watching him," Sarah said. "Yes. I followed him one afternoon and saw him checking your mail before you got home. He opened several letters, including one addressed to Grace. The look on his face when he read it." Rebecca shuddered. I knew something was wrong. "Rebecca made copies of everything before sending the original to Grace," Sarah explained. "She's been our inside source ever since." My head was spinning. "But what about the Kim family emergency Victoria mentioned?" Rebecca's expression darkened. "We finally demanded a full audit of our medical accounts. Thomas has been trying to prevent that from happening." "We have evidence of medical fraud," Sarah said, opening her laptop. "Not just falsifying your condition, but billing insurance companies for treatments that never happened. He's involved at least 8 families. The total fraudulent billing is close to $500,000. I felt faint. "Where's the money?" "Some is in accounts under his name. Some was used to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford on his actual income." "What do you mean?" Sarah turned the laptop to face me. On the screen was a property listing for a vacation home in the mountains. Purchased 8 months ago under Thomas's name. She clicked to another tab. A woman in her 30s smiled back at me, her arm around Thomas's waist. They stood on the deck of what appeared to be the same mountain house. "Her name is Isabella Rodriguez," Sarah said gently. "They've been seeing each other for almost 2 years." The room tilted. 2 years. While I was trusting him with my health, sharing our home, building our life together, Thomas had been planning his escape with a younger woman using money stolen through medical fraud. Insurance money, healthcare funds meant for real patients. "Does Victoria know?" I whispered. "We don't think so," Grace said, squeezing my hand. "But there's more." Sarah scrolled to another document. "Your medical decline is documented in records from Dr. Martinez." Dr. Martinez, a name I'd heard mentioned but had never actually met. "I've never seen this doctor." "That's because he doesn't exist," Sarah said. "The medical license number is fake. The office address is a vacant property Thomas has been using through a shell company." "He created a false medical history for me," I said, the full extent of his betrayal hitting me. "But why? If he wanted to leave, he could have just broken up with me." "Because of the medical insurance policies you have," Grace reminded me. "If you were declared mentally incompetent due to medical reasons, Thomas could become your healthcare proxy, and that proxy would have complete control over your medical decisions and insurance benefits. The insurance policies from my years as a nurse, substantial enough that Thomas had always insisted on being the beneficiary. I'd thought little about it over the years, trusting him completely. If you were declared incompetent, however," Sarah added, "he could control your medical care entirely, and there would be significant insurance payouts for long-term care." "And Victoria?" I asked. "Where does she fit into this?" Rebecca looked uncomfortable. Her fiancé, Marcus, he works for the same medical billing company as Thomas. "Is he involved?" "We're not sure yet," Sarah admitted. "But here's what we do know. Last week, Thomas processed several large insurance claims with Marcus's authorization code. My phone, the burner phone, buzzed with a text message. I looked down and felt the blood drain from my face. "What is it?" Grace asked, alarmed. I held up the phone. The message was from an unknown number. "Mom, where are you? Thomas found your note." "He's worried. Please come home. We just want to help you get better." "Victoria," I whispered. "She can't know about this phone," Sarah said sharply. "How did she get the number?" Before I could answer, another message appeared. "If you don't come home by tonight, we'll have to contact your doctors. They'll be concerned about your mental state. Please, Mom, don't make this harder on yourself." I stared at the screen, realization dawning. "Thomas, it's not Victoria. It's Thomas using her phone." He's threatening me and letting us know he's still one step ahead, Sarah said grimly. The room fell silent as we all considered what this meant. Thomas knew I had a secret phone. He was monitoring Victoria's communications. And now he was using my love for my daughter to try to lure me back. Rebecca was the first to speak. So what do we do now? Now, I said, finding strength in my anger, we set a trap of our own. The plan came together faster than I expected. Within hours, Sarah had arranged everything we needed, making calls to contacts whose identities she kept confidential. Grace and Rebecca worked alongside her, each bringing their own strengths to our improvised command center. I watched them with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. 3 days ago, I'd been a prisoner in my own home. Now I had allies, strong, capable people fighting for me. You need to respond to Thomas's text, Sarah said, handing me back my burner phone. We need to buy time. I composed a careful message. I'm safe. Need space to think. Please don't involve doctors. I'll call tomorrow. Perfect, Sarah nodded. Vague enough to keep him guessing, but reassuring enough that he won't panic and do something rash. What if he traces the phone? Grace asked. He can't, Sarah assured us. It's a prepaid phone purchased with cash, even if he has connections in the medical system. The most he could get is the general location when a text is sent, which is why we're sending it from here, Rebecca added, and then moving to another location immediately. The phone buzzed almost instantly with Thomas's reply. Marie, please. Victoria's worried sick. Whatever's bothering you, we can work through it. I love you. I felt a bitter laugh escape my throat. He's good, isn't he? If I didn't know better, I'd believe him. Manipulators in medical settings often are excellent at deception, Sarah said matter-of-factly. They use people's trust in healthcare to mask their true intentions. Is that what Thomas is, a medical manipulator? The thought that I'd spent years with someone capable of such calculated deception made me feel hollow. Labels aren't important right now, Grace said gently. What matters is stopping him. An hour later, we checked into a different motel under Rebecca's name, paying cash. The room was similar to the first, clean but basic, with 2 double beds and a small table by the window. What about Victoria? I asked as we settled in. It was the question that had been gnawing at me all day. How do we make her see the truth? That's going to be the most difficult part, Sarah admitted. She genuinely believes Thomas's story about your medical condition. Direct confrontation likely won't work. She'll just see it as confirmation of your confusion. We need evidence she can't dismiss, Rebecca suggested. Something so irrefutable that even Thomas can't explain it away. The medical records, I said suddenly. Dr. Martinez doesn't exist, right? If we can show Victoria that the doctor treating me isn't real. It's a start, Sarah agreed. But Thomas could claim you're seeing a different doctor, or that you're confused about the name. What about the insurance fraud? Grace suggested. Financial records proving he's been stealing. Again, he could claim those are legitimate treatments you've forgotten about, Sarah countered. Remember, in Victoria's mind, you're the one who's confused. Rebecca had been quietly typing on her tablet. What about this? She turned the screen toward us, showing the photograph of Thomas and Isabella in the mountains. Infidelity is hard to explain away, but easier to forgive, I said quietly. If it comes down to believing Thomas is unfaithful or her mother is mentally declining, which is easier for Victoria to accept? The room fell silent as we considered the problem. I think we're approaching this wrong, Sarah finally said. We shouldn't be trying to convince Victoria directly. We need to create a situation where she discovers the truth herself. How? I asked. By using Thomas's playbook against him, Sarah smiled grimly. He's been gaslighting you for months, making you question your own medical condition. What if we turn the tables? Over the next few hours, our plan took shape. It was risky with multiple moving parts, but if it worked, Thomas would be exposed not just to Victoria, but to everyone who mattered. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with everything I'd learned and everything still to come. Around 3 a.m., I slipped out of bed and sat by the window, watching the occasional car pass on the highway. Can't sleep, Grace whispered, joining me. I keep thinking about all the signs I missed, I admitted. How could I have been so trusting? Grace squeezed my hand. Because you loved him. Because you believed in him. That's not a weakness, Marie. It's what makes you human. I let him isolate me from everyone, even you. And now we're fixing that. He looked at me intently. You're not alone anymore. Whatever happens, remember that. Morning came too quickly. Sarah arrived at 7 a.m. with coffee and pastries, along with a middle-aged man she introduced as Michael Chen. Michael is an old friend, she explained. He's a lawyer specializing in healthcare fraud. The lawyer nodded at me. Mrs. Chen, Sarah's filled me in. What Thomas is doing crosses several legal boundaries. Medical fraud, insurance fraud, identity theft with those fake medical records. But we need solid evidence, I said. Yes, and we need to move carefully. If Thomas suspects legal involvement, he could destroy evidence or disappear. Which is why today's meeting is so important, Sarah added. Are you ready? I nodded, though my stomach was in knots. At 10 a.m., I would meet Thomas at a public park. My suggestion sent via text late last night. He'd agreed immediately, clearly relieved I was willing to talk. Little did he know what I had planned. 2 hours later, I sat on a bench near the park's central fountain, exactly where I told Thomas to meet me. Sarah and Michael Chen were positioned nearby, pretending to be a couple enjoying the morning. Grace and Rebecca waited in a car at the park entrance. I spotted Thomas before he saw me. He was scanning the area, his usual calm demeanor evident in his stride. When his eyes finally found me, relief washed over his features. Marie, he said, approaching cautiously. Thank God you're all right. I remained seated, my hands folded in my lap. Hello, Thomas. He sat beside me, leaving a respectful distance between us. You had us worried sick. Victoria has been beside herself. Has she? I asked mildly. Or have you told her she should be worried? His expression flickered briefly before settling back into concerned partner mode. I don't understand. Why did you leave like that? If something's bothering you, we can work through it together. That's what I'm doing now, I said, talking about what's bothering me. I opened my purse and removed a manila envelope, placing it between us on the bench. Thomas's eyes fixed on it, a hint of wariness crossing his face. What's this? Evidence. I met his gaze steadily. Of everything you've been doing. The mask slipped for just a moment. A flash of calculation quickly controlled. Marie, you're confused. This is exactly why Victoria and I are concerned about your condition. The mountains are beautiful this time of year, aren't they? I interrupted. Especially that vacation home you purchased 8 months ago, the one you visit with Isabella. Thomas went very still. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. I nudged the envelope toward him. It's all in there. The property records, the fraudulent insurance claims, the fake medical records for Dr. Martinez, a doctor who doesn't exist. Who's been filling your head with these delusions? His voice had hardened. Is it Grace? I know he's always been overprotective of you. Stop! My voice was quieter than I intended, but it cut through his words like a scalpel. It's over, Thomas. The lies, the manipulation, all of it. I know everything. His expression changed then, calculation replacing concern. He glanced around the park, then leaned closer. What exactly do you want, Marie? Money? Treatment at a different facility? Name your price. I want my daughter back, I said simply. I want her to know the truth. Thomas laughed, a cold sound that made my skin crawl. Victoria believes what I tell her to believe. She thinks her mother is declining rapidly. Who do you think she'll trust? The man who's been managing your care, or the confused woman who disappeared without warning? Let's find out, I said, reaching back into my purse. I pulled out my phone, not the burner, but a new one Sarah had provided. I pressed a button and Thomas's voice filled the space between us. Victoria believes what I tell her to believe. She thinks her mother is declining rapidly. As the recording continued, a figure stepped out from behind a nearby tree. Victoria stood frozen, her face pale as she listened to Thomas's words in his own voice. Thomas's eyes widened in genuine shock. Victoria, what are you doing here? She didn't answer him. Instead, she looked at me, tears streaming down her face. Mom. Her voice broke on the word. Is it true, everything you've been trying to tell me? Before I could respond, Thomas was on his feet. Don't listen to her. This is exactly what I warned you about. She's manipulating you, using edited recordings to turn you against me. Is Dr. Martinez real? Victoria demanded, her voice stronger now. The doctor you said was treating Mom. Does he exist? Of course he exists. She's been seeing him regularly. Then why? Victoria said, pulling out a piece of paper from her jacket. When I called the medical board this morning, did they tell me there's no Dr. Martinez with that license number in the entire state? Thomas's face contorted with anger, then quickly smoothed into a mask of caring concern. It was fascinating and terrifying to witness his transformation, like watching a performer switch characters mid-scene. Victoria, honey, he said, his voice soft and reasonable. I don't know what your mother has told you, but you're misunderstanding the situation. Dr. Martinez might be practicing under a different license or... Stop it, Victoria cut him off. Her hands were shaking, but her voice remained steady. I called every Dr. Martinez in the state. None of them have ever treated Mom. The address you gave me for his office, it's an empty building. I watched my daughter with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. She had done her own investigating, something I hadn't anticipated. Despite everything Thomas had told her, some part of her had harbored doubts. Thomas's eyes darted between us, calculating his next move. This is absurd. I've been taking care of both of you for years. Why would I? Isabella Rodriguez, I interrupted quietly. His head snapped toward me, eyes narrowing. What? Your girlfriend? The Mountain House. The money you've been stealing through insurance fraud to fund your new life. I reached into the envelope and pulled out several photographs. Rebecca Kim has been very helpful. Rebecca? Thomas's composure cracked. What does she have to do with this? She's been watching you, I explained. Ever since she noticed irregularities in her family's medical billing. Mom, Victoria whispered, her eyes fixed on the photos of Thomas and Isabella. How long have you known? I suspected something was wrong for months, but I only learned the full truth yesterday. I took a deep breath. Thomas has been gaslighting me, Victoria, making both of us believe I was getting sicker when really, he was stealing money through fake medical treatments and planning to leave. Thomas suddenly lunged for the envelope, but Michael Chen appeared beside him, grasping his arm firmly. I wouldn't do that, Mr. Chen, he said, showing his legal credentials. The colour drained from Thomas's face. Who are you? Michael Chen, healthcare fraud attorney. He released Thomas's arm but positioned himself between us. We have some questions about certain irregularities in insurance billing practices. Thomas straightened his jacket, his defensive posture sliding into place. I'm not discussing anything without my attorney present. That's your right, Michael nodded. But we have enough evidence to pursue both civil and criminal charges. Insurance fraud, medical identity theft, elder abuse. Perhaps you'd like to cooperate now and make things easier on yourself. This is ridiculous, Thomas snarled. A misunderstanding blown out of proportion by my partner's medical condition. Victoria stepped forward, placing herself at my side. Thomas, I saw the medical records you showed me. I checked every detail. They're fake. You lied to me. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Thomas's face as he realized my daughter was slipping away from his influence. Victoria, please. Everything I've done for us, for our future together. By stealing, she demanded. By lying? By making me think my own mother was losing her mind? You don't understand, he said desperately. Your mother's insurance policies are substantial. I had to. Had to what? I asked quietly. Convince everyone I was incompetent so you could control my health care. And insurance benefits while running off with your girlfriend? Sarah approached, standing beside Michael Chen. Mr. Chen, we've been building a case against you for weeks. We have documentation of fraudulent insurance claims for treatments that never happened. We have evidence of the falsified medical records. And as of this morning, we have testimony from Isabella Rodriguez herself. Thomas's head jerked up. What? She's been very cooperative, Sarah continued. Especially after learning you've been funding your relationship through insurance fraud. She thought you were wealthy from legitimate medical work. You got to Isabella? His voice was barely audible. Federal investigators contacted her this morning, Michael said. Seems she was quite surprised to learn about your existing family arrangements and the source of your income. Thomas's shoulders slumped momentarily before he straightened again, his eyes calculating. Whatever you think you have, it won't hold up. I'm not saying another word without my lawyer. That's fine, Michael said, nodding to a law enforcement officer who was approaching. Thomas Chen, you're under arrest for suspicion of healthcare fraud, insurance fraud, and elder abuse. You have the right to remain silent. As the officer led Thomas away, I turned to find Victoria staring at me. Her expression a mixture of confusion, pain, and dawning horror. Mom, I'm so sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I believed him. I helped him control your medical care. Her voice broke on a sob. I pulled her into my arms, holding her as she cried against my shoulder. You didn't know, sweetheart. He manipulated both of us. But I should have seen it. The way he was so insistent about managing your medications, about keeping you from seeing other doctors for second opinions. I was so worried about you that I didn't question anything. No, I said firmly, drawing back to look into her eyes. You trusted someone in a position of authority. That's what people do when they're scared and want help. But you also started questioning things, didn't you? You checked on Dr. Martinez yourself. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Marcus told me I should trust Thomas completely. That questioning the medical professionals would just confuse you unnecessarily. But something felt wrong. She paused, her expression hardening. Marcus, did he know? Was he part of this? We're not sure yet, I admitted, but Michael will be looking into that too. Grace and Rebecca approached us cautiously. Victoria looked surprised to see my brother. Uncle Grace, what are you doing here? Helping your mom? Grace said simply, giving Victoria a gentle hug. And this is Rebecca Kim. She's been instrumental in uncovering what Thomas was doing. Victoria stared at Rebecca with dawning recognition. Mrs. Kim, you were at our community health fair last month. Rebecca nodded. That's when I became certain something was wrong. I saw how Thomas treated your mother. The constant medical monitoring, the way he dismissed her concerns about her own body. It reminded me of a previous healthcare situation my family experienced. She touched Victoria's arm gently. Medical abusers don't always use dramatic treatments, dear. Sometimes they use the system itself. Victoria flinched at the word abuser but didn't contradict it. What happens now? She asked instead. Now we go home, I said firmly. We reclaim our lives. The days that followed were a blur of interviews with investigators, meetings with insurance fraud specialists, and uncomfortable revelations. Marcus, it turned out, had indeed been aware of at least some of Thomas's schemes. The insurance authorizations he'd processed were intended as kickbacks for helping maintain the fiction of my medical decline. Victoria was devastated. I was engaged to someone who was helping Thomas manipulate your health care, she said one evening as we sat in the living room of our home. A home that felt both familiar and strange after everything that had happened. He manipulated you too, I reminded her, though I couldn't help the anger that surged when I thought of how Marcus had encouraged her to question my mental state, to report my every concern to Thomas. I've been such a fool, she whispered. We both were, I admitted, but now we know better. A week after Thomas's arrest, Victoria moved back home temporarily to help me sort through the medical and financial mess he'd left behind. With Sarah and Michael's help, we were gradually untangling Thomas's web of deceit. Some of the insurance money had been recovered, though much was still tied up in legal proceedings. There's something I need to show you, Victoria said one afternoon, her expression serious. She led me to Thomas's home office, a room I'd been avoiding. From a hidden compartment in his desk drawer, she pulled out a small black notebook. I found this yesterday, she explained, placing it in my hands. I think you should see it. I opened the notebook, my blood running cold as I read the first page. In Thomas's precise handwriting was a detailed list. Marie's symptoms to document and enhance confusion about medications. Move pills, change dosages without telling her, then act concerned when she notices. Memory issues mention appointments that don't exist, then worry when she doesn't remember. Physical decline suggests symptoms she doesn't have, then confirm with fake medical reports. Each page that followed contained dated entries, a meticulous record of how he'd systematically manipulated my healthcare for months. The final pages held something even more chilling, a timeline for having me declared medically incompetent with Victoria named as co-healthcare proxy alongside Thomas. The last entry was dated just 3 days before I'd left. V fully committed to the care plan. Medical competency hearing scheduled for next month. M showing increasing signs of distress. Perfect timing. After proxy secured, phase 2 begins. I closed the notebook, my hands trembling, not with fear now, but with rage. What was phase 2? Victoria asked quietly. I looked up at my daughter, seeing the guilt and pain etched in her features. She had been a pawn in Thomas's game, just as I had. I don't know, I said truthfully. But I think we need to find out. 6 months after Thomas's arrest, I sat in the courthouse waiting room, smoothing my hands over the fabric of my new dress. The preliminary hearings had dragged on for months, but today would bring closure. Thomas's plea deal was being finalized. Nervous? Victoria asked, taking the seat beside me. She looked professional and poised in her tailored suit, though I could see the tension in her shoulders. A little, I admitted, but ready for this to be over. Michael Chen approached us, his expression serious but satisfied. Marie, Victoria, the judge has accepted the plea agreement. Thomas will serve 5 years. For healthcare fraud and insurance fraud with additional time for elder abuse and falsifying medical records. Relief washed over me. Thank you, Michael, for everything. You did the hard part, he said with a gentle smile. Standing up to him took real courage. After he left, Victoria squeezed my hand. I still can't believe we found out what Phase 2 was. I nodded grimly. The investigation had uncovered life insurance policies Thomas had taken out on me. Policies that would pay substantial amounts upon my death. The timing of these policies, coupled with his research into medication interactions found on his laptop, painted a chilling picture of what might have happened had I not escaped when I did. Let's not think about that today, I said firmly. Today we focus on moving forward. Sarah joined us carrying a folder. The insurance investigators have recovered nearly 70% of the fraudulent claims, she reported. Most of the affected families will receive compensation for the unnecessary treatments and stress. And Isabella? Victoria asked. Cooperating fully in exchange for reduced charges, Sarah replied. She claims she had no knowledge of Thomas's medical fraud. But Sarah shrugged skeptically. It doesn't matter, I said. She's out of our lives now. As we left the courthouse, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The nightmare wasn't completely over. There would still be insurance settlements, ongoing medical care to establish with legitimate doctors, and emotional wounds to heal. But the worst was behind us. Mom? Victoria said as we walked to the car. There's something I need to tell you. The serious tone in her voice made me pause. What is it, sweetheart? I've been offered a job with a patient advocacy organization, working with people who've experienced medical abuse and healthcare fraud. Pride swelled in my chest. That's wonderful. I want to help people like us, she continued, her eyes bright with purpose. Make sure they know they're not alone. Help them navigate the system and understand their rights. She hesitated. But it means I won't be living at home permanently. Of course, I said, though a small part of me had hoped she would stay longer. You need your own life, your own independence. What about you? She asked. Will you be okay in that house alone? There are so many difficult memories. I smiled. Actually, I'm selling the house. You are? She looked surprised. But you've lived there for over a decade. Too many shadows, I explained. Besides, I found a smaller place closer to Grace. It's time for a fresh start. Later that evening, Victoria and I invited Grace, Sarah, and Rebecca for dinner at my home. One of the last meals we'd share there before the sale was finalized. As I set the table in the dining room where Thomas and I had shared countless meals over the years, I reflected on how much had changed. Need help? Rebecca asked, entering with a bottle of wine. Just finishing up, I said, arranging the silverware. Thank you again for everything. If you hadn't noticed Thomas intercepting my mail, she waved away my thanks. I know what it's like to have someone in a position of trust betray you. My family went through something similar with a previous healthcare provider. She set the wine down, her expression thoughtful. You know, when I first met you at those community events, I always thought you seemed diminished somehow. Like you were holding yourself back. I was, I admitted. Thomas always had very specific ideas about what was best for my health, what I should do. After a while, it became second nature to defer to his medical judgment. And now? She asked. I smiled. Now I'm learning to trust my own body again, my own instincts. It's liberating. The doorbell rang, announcing Grace and Sarah's arrival. Soon the dining room was filled with conversation and laughter, a stark contrast to the controlled, worry-filled meals of the past. A toast, Grace said, raising his glass as we finished the main course. To my brave sister, who refused to let anyone else define her health. To Mum, Victoria added, her eyes shining with tears and pride, who taught me what real strength looks like. To all of you, I countered, looking around at these people who had formed an unexpected circle of support around me, for helping me find my voice again. After dinner, as we moved to the living room for coffee, I noticed Victoria lingering by the family photos on the mantelpiece. I joined her, looking at the carefully arranged images of our life together. It's strange, she said softly. Looking at these now, I can see how controlled everything was. How Thomas positioned our whole life around his version of what was best for your health. Made sure every picture told the story he wanted to tell. The perfect caring family, I murmured. I'm so sorry I didn't see through it sooner, she said, turning to me. When you first started questioning things, I just accepted Thomas's explanation that you were getting confused about your medical care. I should have. Stop, I interrupted gently. We've been through this. You were manipulated too. The important thing is that when you had reason to doubt, you investigated. You found the truth. She nodded, though I could see the guilt still lingered. Have you thought about what you'll do next besides moving? Actually, yes. I smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement. I'm going back to nursing. Nursing? Victoria looked surprised. Part-time in community health. I want to use my experience to help other people navigate the healthcare system, especially older adults who might be vulnerable to the kind of manipulation I experienced. Mom, that's incredible. Victoria hugged me tightly. You'll be amazing at that. Later that night, after everyone had gone, I sat alone in my bedroom, looking at the empty spaces where Thomas's things had once been. The investigators had taken some items as evidence. I'd donated or discarded the rest. My phone chimed with a text message from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it. Marie, it's David Kim. Rebecca gave me your number. I heard what happened with Thomas. Would you like to meet for coffee sometime? Just as friends. No pressure? David Kim, Rebecca's brother-in-law. A quiet, thoughtful man I'd met briefly at community events over the years. A widower who worked as a social worker specializing in elder care. I remembered his kind eyes, his genuine interest when I'd mentioned my nursing background. I found myself smiling as I typed a response. Coffee sounds wonderful. How about Tuesday? Setting the phone down, I moved to the window and looked out at the night sky. Tomorrow would bring more meetings with lawyers, more paperwork, more steps in the long process of rebuilding my life after Thomas's betrayal. But for the first time in months, I felt truly free. 3 weeks later, I stood in the empty house for the last time. The furniture had been sold or moved to my new apartment. The walls were bare where family photos had once hung. My footsteps echoed in the vacant rooms. I walked through each space, not with sadness, but with a sense of completion. This house had been both home and prison to me. Now it would belong to a young family eager to create their own memories within its walls. In the kitchen, where I'd prepared countless meals, where Thomas had first begun questioning my memory when I couldn't find medications he'd deliberately moved, I placed a small envelope on the counter. Inside was a note for the new owners, wishing them health and happiness in their new home. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Waiting outside whenever you're ready. Everything okay? I typed back, just saying goodbye. Be right out. As I walked toward the front door, I caught sight of my reflection in the hallway mirror, the last item still hanging on the walls. I paused, studying the woman looking back at me. My hair had more silver than it had 6 months ago, and fine lines had deepened around my eyes. Evidence of both stress and newfound laughter. But there was something else there, too, a steadiness. A quiet confidence that had been missing for so long I'd forgotten it was ever part of me. Goodbye, I said softly to the empty house, to the woman I'd been, to the life I was leaving behind. I stepped outside into the bright spring sunshine where Victoria waited by her car. Beside her stood Grace, Sarah, and Rebecca, my unlikely circle of warriors. Ready? Victoria asked, taking my bag. I looked back at the house one last time, then turned to the people who had helped me reclaim my life. Ready, I said, and walked toward my future without looking back.